Hey guys, so I'm back and this video is going to be all about my foundation collection, and I'm going to swatch all my foundations that I currently have because I am obsessed with foundations, and I always get questions about what shade I am in a certain foundation or what is my shade match, and I wanted to just do a video as a reference for all those people that are interested in knowing what shade foundation I wear. Now, just because I wear a certain shade foundation and you think that you might be similar in complexion to me, be mindful that videos don't actually show my true complexion, and pictures too won't necessarily show my true undertones and my true complexion. So you might think you're similar in color to me, but you might not always be. These are just reference shades that you can kind of use for your own reference and, you know, swatch them in person or get samples for yourself to try out before you actually commit to a certain shade of foundation from a certain brand. So before I get into the actual swatching of the foundations, very quickly I wanted to tell you what my skin tone is like. I have a yellow undertone. It's not too strong of a yellow undertone, so some foundations can be a little bit too yellow or a little bit too orange on me. So my reference shade in MAC is a NC44, NC45, which is meant for warm complexions, which has a yellow undertone. The NW shades are meant for undertones that are a little bit more pink or a little bit more red as you get darker in the shade range. So sometimes I don't always have the chance to swatch the foundations in store to check out my exact match. So I do a lot of online shopping and I have to pick my shade from just the shade description and the shade name. And 95% of the time I'm accurate. I can pick my shade out from the swatch, from the shade description and the shade name. And how I do that, I don't recommend this to everybody, but what I do is I have figured out what my actual shade is usually referenced as, and in most brands across the board, drugstore and in high-end stores, I'm usually tan or caramel or honey, amber, any of those, or golden. So any of those golden synonyms, that's what I can pick out in my shade range. So you'll see a lot of my shade names are honey, amber, tan. So that's the shade names that I gravitate towards, and then I look at their description, and anything that says they're meant for golden or warm undertones or tan with a golden undertone or medium tan with a golden undertone, that's what I gravitate towards. But I've been noticing that more often neutral undertones are beginning to match me a little bit better than the golden undertones. I find that some of the golden shades are getting a little bit too orange on my skin once they oxidize, and oxidation happens to any foundation where the oils in your skin mix with the foundation formula, the sun hits it and it changes color slightly, and it gets a little bit, some of them get too orange on my skin, so I have to be careful with that. So I'm veering now towards more neutral undertones, which match me a little bit better. And the swatches that I'm going to show you, I'm going to swatch them on my arm right here. And the reason I swatch them here is because my arm actually matches my face pretty closely. Oh, look at that. It actually matches my skin pretty nicely between my neck and my actual face. So I can actually swatch my foundation on my arm, and sometimes I just swatch it here because it's easy to see the shade, because my back of my arm is a little bit more tan and sometimes my face is a little bit more tan than my actual forearm area. So I don't recommend that for everyone unless you are very sure that your arm matches your face. You usually want to swatch your foundation on your jawline area so you can see the difference in color between your face and your neck. So that's how you should swatch your foundation, but I get away with swatching it on my forearm. So let's get into the shades. I'm going to go over the gamut of foundations I have in my collection, so you're going to see a variety of brands, a variety of shades, and a variety of undertones. So stay tuned and I'll talk to you soon. So the first foundation up is the notorious MAC Studio Fix Fluid. So this shade is NC45, and as you can see, it has a strong yellow undertone. I also have the shade NC44, which I swatched next to NC45, and you can see that NC44 has a strong yellow tone as well, and it's a lighter shade. Then next up we have my MAC Pro Longwear Foundation. And here I've swatched the NC45 in the Pro Longwear, and as you can see, it has a more yellow undertone than the NC45 of the Studio Fix, which can look a little bit orange. Here we have the MAC Match Master Foundation, and this is in the shade 7.0, and as you can see, this one has a little bit more red to it, so it looks a little bit more orange next to the other shades, with the Pro Longwear shade having the strongest yellow undertone. Next up we have the NARS Sheer Glow Foundation, and this is the shade Tahoe, and this is their medium dark number 2 shade, and as you can see, it has a nice creamy yellow undertone. Then we have the NARS Sheer Matte Foundation, and this is also in the shade Tahoe, but it comes off a little bit lighter than the Sheer Glow version. Next up we have the Marc Jacobs Genius Gel Foundation, and this is in the shade 82 Cocoa Light, which is a much stronger neutral undertone, so you can see there's no real yellow to this foundation, but it still blends into my skin. Next is my Chanel Perfection Lumiere Foundation, and this is in the shade 64 Beige Amber, and as you can see, it has a nice strong yellow undertone. Then we have the Dior Skin Nude Foundation, and this is in shade 41, and this one has a nice subtle yellow undertone. This is Givenchy Teint Couture, and my shade is number 8, Elegant Amber, which is the darkest shade. And this shade has a nice yellow undertone that blends seamlessly into my skin. So these are all the swatches lined out. I'm going to move on to the next step, but I wanted to show you all the swatches so you can see the differences in the shade range. I think the best matches are the Givenchy Teint Couture, the Dior Nude number 41, the Chanel Perfection Lumiere in the shade Beige Amber, the NARS Sheer Matte and the NARS Sheer Glow in Tahoe, and then the MAC Pro Longwear in NC45. The MAC 7.0 is a little bit too orange toned for my skin, and the Marc Jacobs Genius Gel in Cocoa Light is a little bit too dark, but it looks better in the summertime when I pick up a tan. Now we're coming up on my favorite foundation. This is the Guerlain Lingerie de Peau. I left the MAC Studio Fix Fluid in NC45 on my arm for reference, but this is the Lingerie de Peau shade 24, and as you can see, it blends in nicely with my skin and it has a slight yellow undertone. I also have shade 25 in Lingerie de Peau, and this is better for the summer months when I have a tan. This is the Makeup Forever HD foundation, and I use the shade 173. This one has a nice yellow undertone and blends flawlessly into my skin. Next we have Makeup Forever Matte Velvet Plus, and I use the shade 70. And this one has a stronger neutral undertone, and it also blends nicely into my skin, but more so when it's summertime. Next up we have the Bobbi Brown Natural Finish Foundation, and this is in the shade Golden 6. And Bobbi Brown's foundations tend to have a strong yellow undertone. I also have the Dior Skin Forever Extreme Wear Foundation, and this is in the shade 50. And this shade obviously is not my match. It has a strong pink undertone, so I only use it for highlight reasons, but I thought I'd show it anyway. Now this is the Smashbox Studio Skin Foundation, and the shade is 4.1. And as you can see, this one has a nice yellow undertone, but it's a little bit dark for me, so I have to wear it when I have a tan. Then we have the Smashbox Liquid Halo Foundation, and it's in shade number 7. And this one has a strong yellow undertone, but it's a little bit too light for me, so I have to use it in the winter time when I have a lighter complexion, or I'll use it for highlight purposes or mixing purposes. And again, here are all the foundations swatched on my arm. And as you can see, I get a pretty good match from the Lingerie de Peau shade 24, and also from the Makeup Forever 173 HD foundation, and even the Matte Velvet Plus in that shade number 70. The Studio Skin Foundation from Smashbox is also a good shade, and the other shades I definitely need to do some work with to get them to match my skin. Now we're moving on to the Lancome foundations. This is Teint Idole Ultra. Again, I left the MAC NC45 for reference. This is the shade 460 Suede W, which as you can see is a little bit too dark for me, but it has a yellow undertone, so I can use it for mixing or when I have a tan. I also have the shade 430 Bisque C, which as you can see is a nice complement to my skin, and I can also mix it in to get a more perfect match. I also have the shade 500 Suede W, which again is way too dark for me, but I can use this for mixing and darken up other foundations, as well as using it a little bit for contouring. I also have the Taint Miracle, and this is the shade 450 Suede C, which is a much better skin tone match, and it has a nice yellow undertone. I also have the Taint Visionaire, which is a duo foundation with the corrector and the foundation, and this is in the shade 450 Suede N, which is a more neutral color, and I also swatched the concealer here. And this is my Becca Matte Skin Foundation in the shade Tobacco, and as you can see, this one blends in nicely with my skin. It has a nice yellow undertone, but it's not overwhelming. Then we have the Immaculate Hourglass Liquid Powder Foundation, and this is in the shade Honey, which as you can see is a little bit too light for me. I can use it for highlighting or during the winter months, and it has a yellow undertone. This is the Clarins Everlasting Foundation, and the shade is 116 Ginger. And as you can see, this one has a very strong yellow undertone that can be a little bit too overwhelming on my skin. So again, here are all the foundations swatched on my arm. Again, I think the Becca Honey is a great match for my skin tone, as well as the Lancome Taint Miracle in 450 Suede C. And I also really like the Taint Adult Ultra in shade 430 Bisque C, but it has a little bit more of a pink under. Here we have the Giorgio Armani Maestro Foundation, and this is in the shade 10. As usual, the NC45 from MAC is still on my skin for reference. This foundation has a nice yellow undertone, and it works well for me in the summer months when I have a tan. I also have shade number 9 in this foundation, and this shade is lighter and has more of a neutral undertone, and it's great for the winter months, and I can also mix the two shades to get a customized shade. Now here's one of my newer foundations. This is from IT Cosmetics. It's the IT 02 Ultra Repair Liquid Oxygen Foundation, and this is in the darkest shade Rich. This one has a nice yellow undertone, but it can come off a little bit too light. I also have the Marc Jacobs Marvelous Mousse Foundation, and this is in the shade 82 Cocoa, and this shade has a nice neutral undertone with a touch of yellow. Also, one of my newer foundations is the Buxom Show Some Skin Weightless Foundation, and this one is in the shade Caramel Kisses, and this one has a nice yellowy undertone, and it's lightweight, so it kind of blends seamlessly into the skin, so you can get away with a shade that's not an exact match. Here's my Tarte Amazonian Clay Foundation, and this is in the shade Tan Deep. And here you have this foundation. It's not really a deep color, but I can use it during the winter months or for highlight. This is the Josie Maran Argan Matchmaster Serum Foundation, and it's in the shade Medium Dark. Now I wanted to show you this foundation. It comes off white at first, and then it's supposed to match your skin, so I'm going to blend it while you're looking. So as you can see, it doesn't match my skin at all. This is a really bad match, and it comes off with a strong pink undertone. This is also one of my newer foundations. It's the Ardency in Americana Custom Coverage Concentrate, and this is in the shade Medium Deep Golden, and it's a super thick foundation because it's meant to be mixed in with tinted moisturizer or a serum to create your own custom coverage. And I also have the shade Medium Beige, and as you can see, Medium Beige is a lot lighter than my skin, and it has a slight pink undertone, but I can use it for highlight purposes. So as you can see, none of these foundations are really a perfect match for me, but I found that the lightweight coverage of the Giorgio Armani Maestro foundations are a little bit more forgiving in the shade range, so if you don't get your exact match, it's so lightweight that it kind of blends in. The Caramel Kiss from Buxom is also a good match too, and because it's lightweight, it kind of blends into your skin. And believe it or not, the IT Cosmetics Oxygen Foundation also blends in really nice. This is the Hourglass Veil Foundation, and the shade is number 6 Sable. Again, I left the NC45 from MAC for reference, and this is the shade Sable from Hourglass. As you can see, it has a very neutral undertone, and it actually is lightweight, so it blends into my skin, but it's better for me when I have a tan. This one is a new foundation on the market. It's the Becca Ultimate Coverage Complexion Cream, which is a full coverage foundation, and this is in the shade Amber. It is a very thick foundation with a strong yellow undertone, as you can see. I have another Becca foundation. This is the Radiant Skin Satin Finish Foundation, and the shade is Tobacco. And this is the shade Tobacco, which looks very similar to the Amber foundation, but it's much more lightweight. This is the Lancome Tin Adult Fresh Wear, which is one of my favorite foundations, and this is just a very old tube that's been through some things. My shade is Suede N1. So as you can see, this one is more of a neutral undertone, and it's darker than my skin right now because I have to wear it in the summertime when I have more of a tan. I figured I'd also show you the Studio Tech foundation from MAC, and this is in the shade NC45. As you can see, the NC45 has a pretty strong yellow undertone, and it actually will blend in nicely with my skin. Then I also have the Full Coverage foundation from MAC, and this is in the shade NC45. As you can see, this shade has a nice strong yellow undertone, and it actually blends in nicely with my skin. Then we have the Fashion Fair Fast Finish foundation stick, and this is the shade Tan. And here we have the shade Tan, and it has a nice solid yellow undertone, but it's not too overwhelming, so it won't come off too orange on my skin. And here we have all the foundations again swatched on my arm, and all of them are actually a pretty good match for my skin, except for the Tint Adult from Lancome, which I actually have to wear in the summertime, but because it's lightweight, it blends in pretty nicely with my skin once I have a tan. And then this Hourglass foundation here in Sable is a little bit dark, but it's lightweight, so it should blend also easily into my skin, especially when I have a tan. I also wanted to show you some not so run-of-the-mill foundations, starting with the Kevyn Aucoin Sensual Skin Foundation. This is the shade SX12, and this foundation, as you can see, has a nice strong yellow undertone. It's nice and creamy. You can use it for foundation or as a concealer. I also have the shade SX11, and the shade XX11 is much lighter in comparison, but it works great as a highlighter. Then I also have the MAC Face and Body Foundation, and this is in the shade C6. And this is a nice buildable foundation, and the coverage actually improves as you work with it on your skin. As you can see, this pretty much blends in with my skin seamlessly. Then we have the Makeup Forever Face and Body Foundation, and this is in the shade 18. And this one, as you can see, has a strong yellow undertone and really blends in nicely with my skin. Next up, we have some Drugstore foundations, and this is the L'Oreal Magic Nude Liquid Powder Foundation. This is the darkest shade they have, and this is 332 Soft Sable. I also have the second darkest shade, which is 330 Classic Tan. So here is Soft Sable, and this is Classic Tan. As you can see, they're both very similar shades, but Classic Tan has a little bit more of a yellow undertone. I also have the L'Oreal True Match Lumi Foundation, and this is in the shade N7 through 8 Classic Tan Cappuccino. And here goes the shade right here, which of course is better suited for me when I have a tan. And then last but not least is my Revlon Color Stay Combination Oily Skin Foundation, and this is in the shade 400 Caramel. And again, this is a darker shade that's more suited for me when I have a tan. So here are all of the foundations lined up again. As you can see, the Face and Body from Makeup Forever is probably my best match, followed by the Face and Body from MAC, which is C6. The Sensual Skin Enhancer from Kevyn Aucoin has a strong yellow undertone. This is the shade SX12, which I actually really like for concealer or highlighting. And then the other shades are more suitable for me when I have a tan. I figured that I'd also share some of the tinted moisturizers that I actually have in my collection, even though they're not my favorite. But first up is the NARS Pure Radiant Tinted Moisturizer, and this is in the shade Seychelles Medium Dark 2. And here we have it. It has a strong yellow undertone, as you can see, and it's very lightweight, so it should blend seamlessly into my skin. I also have the Tarte BB Cream, which is just an amped up tinted moisturizer, and this is in the shade Tan. And here is Tan, which you can see has a very neutral undertone. It even leans on the side of being a little bit pink. I also have the Josie Maran Argan Tinted Moisturizer, and this is in the shade Desert, which, yeah, I don't think I like that for moisturizer at all. And here you can see it has a nice neutrally yellow undertone, which actually blends in nicely with my skin. And here I have the Stila HD Bronzing Beauty Balm, which is not a tinted moisturizer. It's a beauty balm, but it's meant to be bronzing, so a variety of skin tones can use this. And here you have it swatched on my skin, and as you can see, it's a very lightweight cream, and it's also very lightly tinted, so it should work well for the variety of skin tones. And then I figured I would finish up by showing you the foundation sticks that I use for my contour and highlight. and these are from Fashion Fair. This is the shade Honey, which I use for highlight. So here we have Honey swatched on my arm, which as you can see is definitely too light, but it works great as a highlight color because it has that yellowy undertone. This is the shade Nutmeg, which I use for a natural contour. Then we have the shade Nutmeg, which I use for a natural contour. As you can see, it has a yellow undertone as well, and it's a couple of shades darker than my skin, so it works great for a natural contour. This is the shade Sable, which I use for a dark contour. Next up is the shade Sable, which is a rich coffee shade with red undertones. As you can see, this one is definitely darker than my skin, and it has that red undertone, so I'd use it for a more intense contour. I also have one from Iman that I use for contour, and I use the shade Earth 1. Then we have the shade Earth 1 from Iman, which as you can see is just a couple of shades darker than my skin, and again it has that yellow undertone, so it works great for a natural contour shade. So again, here are all the shades swatched on my arm. So the beauty bombs actually blend in nicely to my skin, even though the shades may not be an exact match. Because they're so lightweight, they actually blend into the skin, and even though the shade might be a touch off, it's not obvious because it is so sheer. Then we have my highlight and contour shades that I use. These are the cream products that I use, and they work really well with my natural and even more intense contour and highlight. So there you go, guys. That's the full gamut of all foundations that I currently have, and some of them are a little bit older and they've began to separate, but if they change smell or texture or whatever, just swatch them on your arm to see if it burns or gives a reaction on your skin. Otherwise, it's usually safe to use, but use at your own risk if they're older foundations. Liquid foundations can last at least 2 years, so just test it out on your skin to see if you have any sensitivity, but it's up to you what you want to do. And I find that drugstore foundations actually go bad faster than high-end ones, so that's why I stick to high-end. But yeah, hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. I'll try to leave a list. I'm going to leave a list of all the foundation in shades, so you can reference back to this video and reference those the shade colors that I have listed out. So yeah, until my next video, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.